Hello, everybody. How is everybody doing? We starting the last one, the last event of the series. We're finally at this point. Unfortunately or fortunately, it's up to you, I guess. Yeah, we will be talking about remote config and A/B testing today. And actually, we have a very, very special guest, which is Alex Astrum. He is developer relations engineer at Firebase. Alex, just a few words about yourself, if you wish.
Hey, Andre. Really happy to be a guest on your final edition of the series. As you already said, I'm a Firebase developer relations engineer. I've been writing software for professionally probably for 10 plus years, and a little bit before that in high school, essentially tinkering with stuff and making money for my little pleasures. Other than this, I really enjoy traveling, even though this year it never happened. And I also like music and, of course, tinkering with stuff, building things, doing a little bit of smart home in the free time.
Do you play any instruments, any musical instruments?
I actually do. I started playing guitar in school, and nowadays I'm learning piano. This year has been pretty good at sitting down and trying to catch up with some of the stuff I wanted to do for a long time.
Yeah, I guess you have a lot of time for that now. Cool.
Not as much as you think, but yeah, I found maybe a couple of hours every month to train my piano skills.
That's super cool.
That's
All
really
right.
cool.
Yeah, we also have Delton and Raf with us as well. Happy to talk to you guys and answer any questions. Delton will be on the back end. Thanks again for managing all the streaming stuff. So I will just quickly go over where you can ask questions if you're lost during the workshop or you just want to submit something. Also, we will be having a Q&A at the end of our workshop where you can ask Alex any questions you have about Firebase in general, and we'll just discuss whatever it is that you want to know more. So, Delton, can you share my screen? I'm going to go over the Discord real quick. So yeah, we have Think Outside the Value Discord server. If you have some problem setting up the code during the workshop or you want to catch up after the workshop, please feel free to add yourself here. You will just need to agree to some user information and you will access the server pretty easily. We have our special channel in here, which is Firebase series, which is also Flutter series if you're interested in that. So feel free to kind of submit your questions there. If you have some small questions during the talk, please submit them in the YouTube comments. And also, we hosted a preview channel of our website where you can submit questions specifically to Alex and us at the end of the session. So if you think of anything, please feel free to submit questions there. Delton, if you could probably paste the link to that would be nice. Cool. Okay, so let's kind of go over, Let's go over high level of what we're going to be talking about today and what the structure of the workshop is going to be. My machine is pretty slow today, as always, so just give it a few seconds. So yeah, basically the topic of today's workshop is remote config and A/B testing. We'll kind of like touch base on what remote config is, what A/B testing is, and then Alex is gonna go like deep inside the concepts and explain them from like a developer perspective, a professional. I hope you're excited for that. Okay, let's try this again. Please don't fail me. Come on. Come on. Yes, it's there. All right. So yeah, as I said, the agenda is we're gonna just quickly go high level. Why would you even use these services? What they are, and how do you include them in your web app? And then Alex is going to talk about them more in depth, and we'll also show some codes of how you could use remote config or A/B testing in your web app or mobile app. So you have some code snippets and kind of an understanding of how the API works, I guess. Before we begin, a bit of terminology. We'll not go very deep into this, but yeah, we'll talk more about remote config and A/B testing. There's like a lot of different kinds of testing you can perform: unit tests, integration tests. A/B testing is like a separate domain in testing where you compare two different, you test on two different kind of views or feature sets and then compare which one does better. And also you can basically reveal them to different groups of users, and we'll see how that works further on. Raf, do you mind talking about the other ones we see here?
Yeah, so conditions are going to be, so obviously conditions is a regular English word, but in terms of Firebase and specifically remote config, conditions are going to be the things that will determine your remote config values. So if you were to display different things for a Macintosh user as opposed to a Windows user, you would set up a condition that looks for the user properties, determines whether or not they're Macintosh or Windows or maybe even Linux, and then you use those conditions within remote config to deliver different app experiences. And then onto experiments. Experiments is what you'll use to be running your A/B tests. So each A/B test is essentially a little experiment. You're trying to see whether group A likes your changes more than group B or vice versa. And then the last thing is churn. And churn is a measure of how likely your user is to leave your site. And essentially you want to lower this. And so you can run some Firebase predictions to decide if this user is going to churn, if they're going to leave, and maybe you can specify different remote config options for them. That's more high level, and I'm sure Alex can give us a lot more in regards to churning and the integration with remote config and A/B testing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like churning is also a big thing when you do Firebase predictions, right? Like when your predictions predict that some users will kind of wander off your app, you probably want to incentivize them to still be engaged and still kind of engage with the content, basically. But yeah, this is the terminology we wanted to go over. This probably doesn't make too much sense right now, but as we go forward, you'll understand this better. And once again, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. Cool. Let's talk about remote config. So what remote config, and yeah, if anybody has anything to add, by the way, Alex, feel free to kind of chime in at any time. What's my understanding of remote config is, it's basically like, as the last bullet point says, it's like a key value pairs in the cloud. You can basically store your like JSON objects of your configuration in your Firebase dashboard and then access them in your app. And this gives you the flexibility of changing those values based on some conditions. And as Raf said, those conditions could be anything you want. Maybe it's some like audience, you want to target some audience and show them a different button. So you will set up a condition on, I don't know, maybe it's a Chrome user or it's a Safari user, and you want to display different key value pairs for those users. And yeah, this is pretty much, this is like a very, very simple concept. There's not too much to it, but it has a lot of integrations with other services. And yeah, anybody else has anything to add to remote config before we go to A/B testing?
Well, I'll probably just add that essentially remote config is, you should think about it as more of a ground level service that is the base for building other higher level things like A/B testing or differentiating like different distributions of your app even, or other things that are targeted for a specific subpopulation of your users.
Yeah, exactly. So it really integrates well with other services. And one of those services is A/B testing. So as we mentioned already, A/B testing is this concept when you don't know what works best for your app. Maybe you want like this font style or this font style, or you have two different implementations for the same feature. Maybe the checkout process, you want to implement it as like, I don't know, as a step-by-step form, or maybe it's like one long page. And then you want to test these two scenarios on two different user groups, perform some experiments, collect some data, and then make the decisions to what feature to include based on on the insight you gain. One drawback to A/B testing is that although Firebase is actively adding features, we could not find a way to integrate it with the web right now. But by the time you are watching this video, please, once again, we've mentioned this in the previous workshops, check out the documentation. It might already be available for web at that point. But right now, if you want to integrate A/B testing, it works perfectly fine with your Android apps and your iOS apps, and the APIs for that are pretty cool as well. Yeah, that's it on the very high level. I'm probably going to pass the things over to Alex. Alex, I know you wanted to kind of dive deeper into these concepts and tell us more about the insights of what's coming for remote config and A/B testing. So I'm just gonna give it over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot. I guess I'll start sharing my screen in a second. So today's plan is for me to, first of all, do a bit of overview of the things that you already learned throughout the series, just essentially going through all the Firebase products. And probably this time I'll mostly just focus on some of the subtle differences on when to use one versus the other, rather than looking at into too much detail of how to implement things. I'll probably do more of a bird's eye view and specifically target things which maybe are not obvious from the beginning when you look at these products. And I'll dive in a lot more detail around the growth pillar, particularly the products that have this component of targeting your audience groups, since this is the discussion theme for today. Okay, so without further ado, I'll start sharing my screen, and I hope that this presentation will be really useful, and I'm looking forward to hear questions after this. Okay. So Firebase, I named this presentation Firebase Remote Config because these are the kind of the two portions of my presentation. The first one is Firebase in general. The second one is Remote Config and the other products which are directly or indirectly linked to it. So let's dive in. Okay, just a quick reminder what Firebase is, and our focus is particularly helping out app developers. And that's the reason why we have it across a few different platforms like iOS, Android, gaming, and web. That also means that web is not the only focus of Firebase. So please keep that in mind when you're developing on Firebase. Web is most probably supported for most of the use case, but there would be occasional things which would be specifically targeted to other mobile platforms. So please keep that in mind. Also, when you develop on Firebase, you know that you can trust it to allow you to grow and expand, just like the many million other active developers out there. Okay, so to keep things simple through the myriad of products, we try to group them in a few pillars, particularly targeting the the life cycle portion of your app when you would either start using these products or when you focus most on using a certain product. So when you only start building something, you'd usually start with something like authentication, and then add the database, add some logic through cloud functions, and maybe maybe you'll also need hosting for your app. So that's the first group of products. Now, once you have something built out and you want to start testing it with your friends, then that's when you start using the products from the middle of the screen. In particular, if you're working with mobile, you care a lot about crash and stuff like that. If you work on web, you probably don't care too much about Test Lab, but you still might be interested in performance monitoring since you want your app to load fast no matter the platform. Now, once you already have your app in the wild and people are using it, that's when the things on the right become more and more important. First of all, you want to have analytics working if possible. This will allow you to start gathering data and understand the audiences that you're working with. And once you have some groups of people that you can split into a few audiences, you can do cool things for them. For instance, you can serve different versions of your product which are better aligned with their expectation using things like remote config and A/B testing, which we'll talk about today in more detail. But you can do a lot more than this. On mobile, we have predictions, which will try to tell you which audiences are expected to do a certain thing, like, for instance, buy something in your app, so that you can target them with specific offerings. On web, there is a little bit less support available for some of these features. However, please check our website regularly, since we come up with new features all the time. So you might discover new features that you didn't know existed for your platform, or your platform might get support for additional features in the future. So nevertheless, always check our website if you find yourself that you might use one of the basic offerings which maybe are not yet available for your particular use case or platform. Also, there is a really active open source community out there who might have some solutions for you to do a similar thing, or with your framework, with your library, on your environment, even if Firebase maybe does not have an official solution ready yet. So in between the official docs and the open source community tools, I'm pretty sure you'll find most of the stuff that you're looking for out there. Also, outside of just targeting audiences and growing and giving them the best experience possible, there is one more thing which we try to do in order to make it real cool for you, really easy and real simple for your users to onboard, which are things like dynamic links, which should make the general cross-platform experience much easier, especially if you later on start giving them a cross-platform solution. And last but not least, cloud messaging works cross-platform, including web, when you need to notify people who have your app open on their device, or who have the app working in the background about things that they might want to be aware of. Like I said, we support quite a bit of platforms. However, today I'll be focusing primarily on web, since that's what you are currently looking into. So let's go and look on the first group of products, which you already probably know. Nevertheless, I'll try to stop a little bit at each of them and just say which are their most important differentiators, so that you have a much better understanding next time which product you might want to use first for your use case when you don't have a sample to get you started right off the bat. So Realtime Database is historically the first Firebase product, and it's still a great solution for some use cases, like when you have a frequently changed data, like, for instance, sensor data from an Internet of Things network, or some stats that you update very often and you want them to be pushed to all of your clients. It works as a simple JSON object, so don't expect too much structure, but if you just want to load data from a server and keep it in your app, that's a pretty good solution. One of the cool things I like about it is one-click backup and restore, as well as online presence detection. The next one, which is probably one of the most popular things we have out there, is called Firestore. You probably already know really well how to use it, so I won't stop too much. I'll just want to give a heads up there that it's great if you want to store and query or sync data in real time, as long as those queries stay reasonably simple and your data has some structure in it. Firebase Auth is what makes Firebase possible, essentially. And probably one of the cool things which sometimes people don't realize, but is super important later on, is that Firebase Auth is not just a login a service that allows you to log in the users with a few things like email, password, phone, or OAuth. It is also a standard compliant GWT token-powered system. That means you can actually integrate it with third-party authentication systems by writing a little bit of custom code. It could become really important when you want to integrate your app with something out there that's maybe not already supported by Firebase natively. Cloud storage. That's where you'd put all the content that's too big to fit in Firestore, as well as the stuff that is large enough that you might need to pause or resume uploading from your web app or mobile client. Hosting. That's one thing which you're probably already using. If not, I would encourage you to try it out. As long as you have a static website which already uses Firebase, hosting will actually integrate real nice in that workflow and allow a seamless deployment for all of your front-end client code. It is, of course, a secure web hosting. We generate free SSL certificates for anyone who needs them. We support custom domains. It has a content delivery network, a global content delivery network. And we also offer some nice things on top of that, like staging content using GitHub Actions, as well as detailed access logs that can be exported, can be accessed through Google Cloud. One of the cool things, which are maybe a little bit less known, is that you can integrate your Google Cloud run containers as well as cloud functions with Firebase Hosting. So if you have some machine learning running in the background there in a Python environment using Cloud Run, or you have some Firebase cloud functions doing some heavy lifting, you can integrate them easily with hosting, and you can even set up things like caching the results if those results are not expected to change too often, as well as add quite a few really cool advanced customizations to really make the dynamic and static portions of your website play nice together. And the last cool thing is that you get all of these on the same domain. So the URL that you give to your users, particularly developers, if you want to expose an API, would look really nice and it would be easy to remember for them. Machine learning is something that probably is not as much targeted at web as it is targeted towards mobile apps. However, I'll mention it since it's a real easy way for you to just get familiar and started with ML if you haven't done that already. Firebase doesn't offer a very comprehensive set of MLs, but it's a good introduction with both on-device as well as cloud and custom model deployments. Give it a try if you haven't and you have a really good use case that could use some automation. Okay, that's it for the first pillar. Now let's move to the middle one. In the middle, we have the stability stuff. It's mostly relevant for mobile apps. For instance, Crashlytics will allow you to troubleshoot crashes in any of your mobile apps. For web, however, performance might be more relevant. And one of the main thing that you might want to look into is essentially figuring out how fast your app actually loads for different users or for different geographies. Sometimes when we develop on our machines, we might not realize that some people might have a slower computer, might be using the website from a mobile device with a slow connectivity, or the device maybe is not as capable as ours. So we might not realize if they're having a bad or not ideal experience without actually looking at some numbers or running some user research sessions. Firebase Performance tries to bring us closer to really understanding what the experience feels like for our users from their perspective. So be it the standard instrumentation that comes with Perf or custom traces that you can configure, they should give you a better understanding on how your users actually experience your app. Now let's go over a more detailed dive here and see how it would actually look like. So when you publish your app with the SDK integrated, Firebase Performance will start collecting data from all your users and populate a dashboard summarizing the performance characteristics of your app. You can extend this dashboard using the SDK to collect your own custom metrics. So if you suspect that some parts of your app might be slower than expected for some users, you can measure that for yourself. And Firebase Performance Monitoring will help you drill down into specific devices, regions, mobile connection speeds of your app that are the most problematic. So you can spend time optimizing the experience to the users who are affected the most. And you can find out if your optimization actually work and make the experience better. The dashboard also gives you opinionated and actionable advice about which problems it thinks you might want to fix first. These insights are automatically generated for you, so you know where to focus your energy to make sure that everybody is having a great experience with your app, no matter where they are. If you want your app to reach the widest possible audience, it needs to work well on a variety of devices and operating systems. And I hope that Firebase Performance will allow you to reach those targets on all of them. Firebase Test Lab, this again is particularly targeted at mobile devices. So I'll be a little bit more. I'll go faster over this. I will only mention that it's really useful when you want to test native apps on Android, particularly because Android is known to have a quite diverse ecosystem of devices, and it's not always possible to really know how your app will behave unless you actually run that on that specific thing. And last but not least, app distribution. Yet again, this is relevant for native apps in particular, since for web, you can just do the distribution yourself by just deploying a branch from GitHub using your Firebase Hosting GitHub action. So instead of having to do an app distribution, you just send a link to your customers directly to test out a new branch or feature of your app. So probably this is more relevant to mobile user. Nevertheless, Firebase can still help you test things out with web as well. The workflow is just a little bit more different. So you have to stop and think on what's actually relevant for web that might not be relevant for mobile. Okay, now let's go into the grow and engage land. And the first thing that we're gonna look at in more detail is analytics. Even though you probably are familiar with these analytics features, I think it's still important to go one more time over, since the rest of the products like remote config and A/B testing really build on top of the concepts that are native to analytics. So just to sum it up, analytics measures up to 500 different event types and 25 user properties per event, capturing over 15 events automatically, including app and install. Of course, in your case, instead of uninstalls, what it will capture would be people who are entering and exiting your website, as well as recurring or newer unique users. It also measures performance for ad campaigns on over 50 networks. You can export analytics to BigQuery in order to query those data yourself, which I find really useful at times. Also, you can use analytics audiences to power other features like AdWords and trigger cloud functions. I would want to kind of make a quick note that cloud function triggers, they might not behave identical across different platforms, since the analytics events have slight difference in the way they are ingested for web versus mobile. So you want to double check each of the custom logic triggers or data you're exporting for specific platforms that are of interest. Don't make the assumption that if they work for iOS, they would work for web, or the opposite. Just make sure that your platform is actually has the actual data that you want tracked, logged into analytics. Okay, now that we've gone over the basics, let's look at some examples of the stuff that you should expect to find in analytics. Things like how many users you've gotten in the last month, which conversion events are they hitting, how much time the user spent, how much money you're making, and are there any problem with your latest releases or with any specific audiences in your app. As an example, we look here at how many users completed a level in our game in the last 30 days. And again, this is an example of a game on a native platform. For a website, the workflow will be quite similar. So instead of a game, think of how many users maybe bought a certain product from your store. So for instance, we can select a stream. Now, a stream is essentially an analytics configuration. A website can be a stream, a native app can also be a stream, and so on. So essentially, when we say streams, we mean one type of one source of analytics data. Like, think of this as a website is like a source of flowing events. So similar, an app might be a source of these flowing events. So we call them streams. Okay, so we selected this stream. We can also select some demographics as well as targeted versions. If needed, we can also use one or more custom attributes or proper user properties that we want to track. So whether it is that we're looking to experiment with the ways to make our app better with A/B testing, using analytics for predictions, which is currently mostly useful for native apps, but nevertheless, you can still use analytics with your own custom machine learning models or third-party models in order to predict things for maybe unsupported platforms as well, or check back and see once new platform might be added, as well as monitor stability and performance, deliver messages that are relevant to your users in a timely manner, make advertising work better for you and your customer, as well as report the revenue and figure out the efficiency of your or third parties campaigns associated with your app. So looking at all of the stuff that analytics tracks, let's dive in a little bit into the actual specifics. So predictions, it's particularly useful for mobile apps. I'll go in a bit more detail here just because I think it's really a cool product that you should be aware, even though you're probably not going to be using it right away. So the most useful thing about prediction is that it allows you to make sense of some of the expected behavior of customers based on the behavior that they already exhibited without having to overthink the relationships yourself. So anytime a user does a certain list of actions and then results into a conversion event, this chain can be fed into our predictions models. So for future users that are similar in some ways to those users, you can have similar models. For instance, you can track things like users who will be churning or leaving your app, users who are spending, users who are not spending, as well as users who do a certain action, like for instance, finish a level in your game or join a multiplayer session. No matter what event you want to predict, the model will behave in quite a similar fashion. It will try to see what are the common things that other users who performed that event had done before that, and then look at the users who haven't yet performed that event and see if they are expected to perform it. So for instance, you don't have to do this analytics yourself and spend time. You can just trust the algorithm to spot these trends for you and then dive in when you want to do a more in-depth analysis. Of course, if there's not enough data to predict a certain behavior, the prediction model will just tell you that it was not able to give a conclusive result. So you'll see that in the UI whether the result is there for you or not. Okay, remote config is similar in that it also uses analytics events as a source of flagging whether a configuration should be passed to the user or not. However, remote config is probably a lot easier to understand and wrap your head around if you want to really kind of get a deep understanding of how things work. For instance, think of remote config as an if-else or a switch case list of conditions. So a remote config feature, we call them flags, works like this. You would have a precondition, and if that precondition is met, then a certain value would be served to the user. If the precondition is not met, then the remote config will look at the next condition you have, and next, until it finds something that is describes your current user. And if nothing is found, then it will just serve the default value set for that key. So at the conceptual level, a remote config is just a set of key value pairs that has some conditional values based on some attributes that can be taken from analytics, or for other cases, they can also be taken directly from a known attribute, like the platform, or the web browser, or the version of their system. So let's look at some examples. So for example, there will be time, yet again, I'll use an app sample here to try to illustrate some of the things you can do with remote config. So there will be times as an app developer when you want to make some changes inside your adventure app, like maybe try some different colors, or you want to tweak the text, or you want to adjust the difficulty. But having cut a new build, get it published and wait for your users to download it every time you want to make a tiny change can be expensive and time-consuming. Remote config is here to help you. It allows you to do all of these changes with minimal code without needing you to publish a new version of your app or website. I guess for mobile app, it's a little bit more painful to do these customizations directly, but even for website, it could be valuable since you won't have to go through a full procedure of testing and releasing just to tune up a value in your configuration. Okay, you start by providing default values locally on the user's device with your app. Then, either through the Firebase console or remote config's RESTful API, you can upload new values to the cloud. The next time your users starts up your app, it will download those values and apply them on top of their current values. So you can push new values to, for instance, Canadian users if you want to deliver a customized experience based on users' location, or just try your app with a small number of users before you push it out to the rest of the world. Our partnership with analytics can deliver different values to different users based on user properties in our audiences that you've recorded in Google Analytics for Firebase. This can let you deliver a nice customization experience based on your users' preferences, all of which can be adjusted completely through the Firebase console. Most importantly, Firebase Remote Config is the primary driver on how you can make changes in your app using A/B testing, which means that any variable you have wired up to go through remote config, whether that's the difficulty of a level in your game or your entire onboarding flow, you can A/B test. And here I wanted to make a quick note that no matter whether you decide to use your own A/B testing logic, which can be as simple as an if remote config value equals that, then use this code as use that code, or you're using Firebase A/B testing UI in the console, the way you'd run those A/B tests will be pretty much the same. So you would be having 2 or more different options that you would be serving to users based on their audiences or their environment, and probably a percentage depending on how confident you are that the change will actually give you a good result. You would start tracking these. If you use A/B testing, Firebase will track this for you. And if you use your own A/B testing logic, you'll have to track it either through an analytics event or through other means. So essentially, you'll be tracking the chosen variant for your user, and then you'll be looking in analytics at the conversion results that you were expecting. Did the users with a different color scheme buy more stuff? Did the user on iOS, for which you updated the interface to better align with Apple guidelines, started spending more time in your app or buying more stuff from it? So whatever you decide, you have to decide the criteria first. And this is super important. It's probably not covered in this presentation in written, but I want to mention it's super important that you decide the criteria for your A/B testing validations before you actually run the test. And you don't change the criteria just because you don't like the results, because otherwise it would not be a true experiment. Otherwise, it will be just a play in the sandbox. Really, the important thing to take away, if there's one thing I want you to take away, is that in order to test a hypothesis of a change that you want to validate in regard of improving or not affecting too much your user experience, is to decide the criteria, stick with it for the duration of the test, unless something really bad happens and you decide to just stop the test altogether. And at the end of it, to make the decision based on your initial criteria. If you stick to this plan, I can guarantee you that over time, you'll find it much easier to test hypotheses, and you'll iterate much faster toward a better product that your users will love than just trying to randomly change values and hope that they like those changes. Okay, now that we've gone through kind of the concepts behind A/B testing, let me tell a little bit about how. Let me give an example how an A/B testing session will work end-to-end using the Firebase A/B testing. So you make dozens of decisions every day when you're building your app, everything from how it looks and feels to how difficult your game is. And it's often that these small decisions can make the big difference between having an app that's successful and one that isn't. But when you're making those changes, how do you know they're actually the right ones? You can rely on your gut and ask your friends and conduct focus groups. By the way, focus groups are great ways to test assumptions, but they are expensive and time-consuming. However, often the best way is to simply try this out in the wild, especially if you have a big customer base already, so you can afford to experiment with some of them. And and I think most of us know that A/B tests are important, but because they involve a fair amount of work to create and run, probably you don't want to perform them as often as you should. So Firebase A/B testing tries to streamline this where it's most important and hardest to do. The first step is determining who you want to place into your experiment. It could be your entire app population, but generally, A/B testing provides you with a number of ways to customize your audience. You could run your experiment with a small subset of users, for example, if you worry that the change might be too disruptive. Or if you experiment with text, you can limit your experiment to people who are using your app in a certain language. And if you're trying to change your app in-store, you could limit your experiment just to the users who Firebase Predictions think will spend money in your app in the near future. This is particularly relevant for mobile apps and things that have monetization. Next, you'll tell A/B testing what's going to change for each experiment. For instance, if you're testing out different notification styles, you can use A/B testing alongside with Firebase Cloud Messaging to determine what message text to send to each variant. Or if you're looking to make changes within the app itself, you can specify what different remote config values you'll send to each variant. And because you can wire up nearly any variable in your app to use remote config, this gives you a lot of freedom in what you can change. You might just want to change a couple of values that affect the difficulty level of a game, but it could also be a big JSON string that represents your entire getting started flow. It's really up to you. After that, you're going to tell A/B testing what goals you want to set from the experiment. This might be anything. It may be increasing your app purchase, or you can specify any analytics event that you want to measure. And this helps not just with choosing winner for experiment, but also determining how A/B testing refines your experiment when it is in progress by using some sophisticated Bayesian statistics on the backend. So that's one of the main advantage that the fully managed A/B testing gives you, is that sometimes the experiments might need some fine-tuning in regard on how they're served, and we try to really optimize this for you so that you don't have to have a data scientist or statistician on your team to do this optimization for you. However, even without this optimization, just running a simple A/B test with a 50-50 split is a lot better than not running an A/B test at all. You can also define a number of secondary goals in your A/B test. This is useful for ensuring the overall health of your app and your experiment. If you made a change that boosted your revenue, for example, but it was so aggressive in pushing app purchases that it started hurting your retention, that would be important to know. And so secondary goals can help you track exactly that. Now, once everything is done, you can sit back and relax. And A/B testing will do the work of selecting your audiences, making sure that the specialized experience you've designed with your A/B testing, and measuring, interpreting the results back to you. These results are then presented to you in an easy-to-understand format, and you can then roll out the winner notification to the rest of the population, or push those new remote config settings to the entire op audience. Whew. Okay, now let's cover the last really important kind of piece of this customization pipe, and this is cloud messaging. Also known as FCM, you can use this API to build a powerful programmatic messaging system. Easily manage notification campaigns, schedule and send messages, and engage the right users in the most relevant time. Probably on web, this is not quite as impactful as on mobile, since people won't have your website open all the time. So on web, you might need to besides running these cloud messaging, also run email campaigns, which you'd probably use an external tool for. However, should you use something like a mobile app or even having a PWA added to the home screen of the phone, then you actually might find more value in just running these Firebase cloud messaging campaigns. Now you can target your audiences using analytics audiences and measure results with analytics automatically. Use of the new experiment frameworks to test and identify the most effective notification messages for the users, and then optimize your application flows for that. Okay, let's look in a little bit more detail at this as well. Notification can be a critical part of any app experience, whether that's letting a chat participant know that somebody's replied to their message, telling your users about new exciting features, or informing your big spenders that something is on sale right now. However, notifications are difficult to do, especially when you need to do it cross-platform, and particularly when you have to notify millions of people at the same time. That's where Firebase Cloud Messaging can really help you. It's a free solution which is powerful and scalable enough to deliver hundreds of billions of messages per day to more than 250,000 applications, with most of them delivered in less than 200 milliseconds. Firebase Cloud Messaging is also cross-platform, where a lot of its values comes from. And because cloud messaging, I'm not sure why this photo is here. And because cloud messaging just works across all of the devices, you don't really have to worry about trying to deliver things because one of the devices was offline. The cloud message will try to do that for you once the device comes online, and also make sure that all of the notifications are delivered as fast as possible and as efficiently as possible from the cloud directly to your users. So let's give you a quick overview on how cloud messaging works. This should give you both a better understanding on when to use it, how to use it, as well as what you would have to build in order to have a similar system yourself, or what things you should think about when you set up an email campaign for your customers. So when your device first registers with the service, you get back a token, which can be used to uniquely identify the device to the server. Your device can also ask to subscribe to topics, which can really be any arbitrary string you specify, and the service will keep track of all of that for you. Generally, a topic with cloud messaging could be similar to an email subscription topic with an email subscription, even though a lot of the times people would use a more granular approach here, so they would actually have topics for things that would not be normally customizable for customers, but rather internal things to track. Behind the scenes, Firebase also associates the users with a unique identifier from Google Analytics for Firebase. So you can send notification with this user base on certain analytics data while still doing so in a privacy-respectful way. To send notification, you simply tell Firebase Cloud Messaging either the Firebase console, either using Firebase console or Cloud Functions or your own server, what message you want to send and who you want to send it to. You can target an individual device using its FCM token. You can target a group of devices that have all subscribed to the same topic, or you can make use of Firebase Analytics to send messages to groups of users that exhibit the same behavior. And any of these users, including iOS devices, will be routed messages to through APNs to make sure they get delivered through. And for user on Apple devices, these messages will be routed through the Apple's push notifications server to make sure that they get the messages delivered in a way that is compliant with Apple's requirement. For web, the messages will be delivered similar to how they are delivered on Android, so directly by Firebase servers. Okay, and the last thing, so hopefully they gave you a bit of an understanding how FCM works. And what I wanted to tell you before moving next is that when you set up a campaign outside of FCM, you probably also have to think about these things, like which topics you would want your customers to be subscribed for. And if you want those topics to be automatically assigned based on analytics events, to have a pipeline to get those analytics audiences into your subscription software. So for messaging, we take care of that for you. If you, however, have to build your custom pipeline, you might have to extract the audiences into something like BigQuery, then run some scripts on top of it to extract those into some exportable format that the email campaign software would understand. And the very last topic that I'll be covering today is Firebase Dynamic Links. It offers you a way to really land the user where they want to go, which is, in your case, might be a deep link inside your web app. But if you decide later on to launch a native app, that same deep link can also land them into a certain screen in the app. And this probably doesn't affect you too much as long as you just stick into app. However, should you decide to go native, you would want to take a look at Firebase Dynamic Links, since it really can take care of you having a very predictable and similar behavior across the two major platforms, iOS and Android, similar to how you have currently it set up on web. Okay, I will skip the demos with the links since probably you don't care too much about them at the moment. And just give you a heads up that we really love open source and we would really appreciate your contribution, be it in our GitHub repos by filling bugs or suggesting features, as well as the community contributed packages. You can find a lot more information on the firebaseopensource.com, as well as on our official docs and GitHub organization. Also, I will highly encourage you, if you want to find out more of the advanced topics about Firebase, to really check out our YouTube channel. It's probably it's just a treasure trove of useful, cool stuff that you can see now, specifically since there's no live events happening right now and probably realistically in the near future as well. Really give it a try. We have a lot of really cool things which are pre-recorded on YouTube. And there's also plenty of other resources. We have an active Firebase community on Slack, as well as Stack Overflow. And you sometimes might be surprised how fast some of your questions will be responded there. So do give them a try if you have any questions that would be particularly useful for the community as a whole. If we miss something in our documentation, do let us know. Ask the questions in a way that we can give a relevant answer to, and you'll know that you actually contributed back, and we will be actually quite thankful for you doing this. And thanks again. I'll be happy to answer some questions today if you have any. If not, you can reach out to me on Twitter. You can probably find me on LinkedIn by using my name. Also feel free to reach out to your group coordinators, which might be able to put you in touch with me directly if you want to, or with one of our amazing developer relations people from Firebase or Google in general. Yet one more time, thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed this.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for putting together such a great presentation.
Yeah, I think it was a great overview as well. Like, thank you for going over all the services that we covered already. So this was a very good recap, as well as a lot of things that we haven't touched on at all. Like cloud messaging was awesome as well. We have some questions for you ready, but before we do that, we wanted to kind of show a small demo of what remote config is and how you could use that in your web app. So I'm going to present my screen. We're just going to quickly go over how that's being implemented, and then we'll have our Q&A portion. All right, so this is like the code overview. Alex already showed some snippets in his presentation, but when you want to include remote config, you would access it from firebase.remoteconfig as any other services like analytics or auth or Firestore. This is the object you will be working with when you want to access properties from the remote config API. Then you want, in development, you want the remote config settings to refresh pretty often. So you can set some pretty low values here. By default, if you don't specify this, it's going to be 12 hours for production. So all your remote config values will be cached and they won't be refreshed every time. But if you're developing and you want to like change something, tweak something, and see the changes in the code, that's a good example of doing so. Now then, in your code, you would probably set up some default values for the properties that you're going to use. So in this example, we're like determining if a user is a Chrome user or a Safari user, and we're setting it to true or false by default, whatever you want to set it to. And then let's say we want to render some different UI for a Chrome user, and this is how you would get it from remote config by using the get value method. So yeah, this is the general idea, and Alex already talked about the the things that you can use this for, right? Like rendering different UIs, implementing different features, all that sort of stuff.
I'd
So
just
let's
like to add one more thing, if that's okay, Andrew. I forgot to add in there that we needed to also run remote config.fetch and activate. And that's actually going to be what activates your remote config values from Firebase.
Good catch. Yeah, I'm gonna show the codes and how we implemented it for our website, so you'll see that there. So let's go quickly look at our console and how remote config looks there. So you can see that first we see the dashboards of different, like how many users were accessing our parameters, and kind of a graph showing how often the different parameters are being used. On the bottom, you have a list of all of your different conditions. So as Alex mentioned, you can think of this like a big switch statement or a big if statement on your backend. Let's look at like one example and see what this is in more detail. So let's say Chrome users. The way you would read this is that I have my parameter, remote config parameter called Chrome user. This is the key that I'm going to access. And then it's going to check some condition, which is called Chrome users condition. So if the Chrome users condition is true, we're going to return true. If it's false, we're going to return false. That's as simple as this. If you want to, you can omit conditions and just set some parameters to some hard-coded values. That's rarely that you would do that, but just to show you that that's possible. Let's look at another one. For example, actually, all of them are going to be pretty similar. I'm going to go into the options and conditions and what those look like. That's going to be more interesting.
Yeah, let me actually talk about a case in which you might want to have this remote config without any condition, just default.
Oh, yeah.
So one case would be when you're rolling out a really major feature and you decided that you don't want to A/B test it or have a progressive rollout. You just want to push it to all the users at once.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, that's what your boss told you. You have to push it as soon as it's ready. Like, okay, in that case, but you're still worried maybe that it might be disruptive. It might break the application for someone. So in that case, you might actually want to create a remote config flag that just is a kill switch for that big major feature. So once people start accessing your app, if they run into trouble, you can then later on create a condition there to turn it off for a subset of users. For example, if you had, I'll give yet another native app example because that's more relevant, but it could apply to web as well. For instance, in case of a cross-browser compatibility issue. For instance, if you had a new iOS app and you had a really cool new graphics package in there that you are worried that might not perform exceptionally well on all devices, and you push the one and you find out that 10% of your users who have an iPhone from 5 years ago have a really weird crash happening 20% of the time. But it never happens for anyone else. Like that's where really remote config can shine, because it can prevent you to really curb down the damage blast. Just turn off the feature for people who are potentially affected until you troubleshoot how to properly fix it in a longer term. So similarly for web, if you have some issue with a specific version of a specific browser or a specific geography for people, like maybe this website is loading too slow, or maybe their browser just doesn't work for your new feature, you can use it as a kill switch. That's a really great way to kind of prevent.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So you don't need to go through your like deployment cycle to roll out, like roll back that feature. You would just toggle the switch on the remote config.
And the thing is, even if you redeploy something, even if you push a new version of your web app to server, you still have to force people to somehow refresh. So you have to bring them back on your app and force them to refresh or to download an update from the store, which can also be tricky to do. With remote config, you don't have to force them to do that. All you have to do is just wait until their cached version expires, the cache setting expires, and after that, they'll just fetch the new version.
Exactly. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. Cool. Let's look at some conditions and what those look like. So we have a bunch here. The main one that I'm going to be demoing is this kind of Chrome users, Safari users condition. If I look into this, what this does is basically you can specify the name for the condition, obviously. the color if you want to differentiate it. And then you can, in this dropdown, there's a bunch of things you can check. You can check a user audience, you can check a language or specific device or operating system. In this case, we're checking the platform that is web, and we're also checking that the browser that the user is viewing our app from is Safari. So we only want to target those users specifically. There's a second way of doing this as well. We could have selected the user audience and then set up an audience from Google Analytics that would target Safari users. We tried, basically, yeah, I think Alex mentioned this before the workshop, like just try whatever works for you best. We found out that this works better for our app, so that's what we did in this condition. There are also different other types of conditions. Like here, for example, this is a good use case for an audience condition, and I'll also show how that works. From the analytics workshop, you might recall that we have a purchaser audience. So those are users that had made a purchase in our app. So we can now specify that some user audience includes at least one purchase. Like the user is in the purchasers group, and that's what determines if the value will be true or false from remote config. What do we have else? So this was our kind of try to simulate A/B testing on web. So you can see that you can also specify some condition that will fire off 50% of the time. Because we couldn't set up A/B testing for web apps. Hopefully that comes supported soon. But what we did is basically we have test users and non-test users, and only half of those, like the segregation, will be half and half. So only 50% of those of our whole user audience will be test users, and we will display different UI for them. So that's pretty much it. Like you can create conditions in here. You can pretty much like whatever you wish to check in your if, like a cloud if or a cloud switch. Like you can specify your condition in here, and then you set up some parameters that you can access on your clients, and they will return different values depending on the condition that they meet. And that's the high level idea. So let's look at how it acts in our website real quick. I'm gonna go, so this is the preview channel for our website. It's not the actual production. But you can see that I have opened the website in Chrome in this tab, and also I have Safari open in my other tab. Let me just quickly sign in here. So the UI matches. So you can see that we're displaying like blue buttons for Safari users and then green buttons for Chrome users. And this is like a platform dependent feature. Also in the console, we are logging this table of basically all the remote config values for this concrete instance of user. So we can see that the Chrome user is true. Safari user is false. We also see that we are a purchaser, so this account has already made a purchase previously. Unfortunately, we're not lucky winner. I think lucky winner, you need to be a lucky winner in like 10% of the cases or something like that. And we also a test user, so we kind of made that 50-50 portion. Now let's look at the Safari and see what the difference is. We can see that we are no longer a Chrome user since we're using Safari, obviously. We're a Safari user. We're also a purchaser, also not a lucky winner, and also a test user. So let's see what do we do and how do we access those properties, and how do we actually render different UI based on those remote config values. So I'm going to go into app.js. From previous workshops, you could recall that this is where we set up our initialization for Firebase. Sorry. The new things here are basically the remote config stuff. So as mentioned in the slides, you would instantiate your singleton remote config object, which you act upon afterwards. You set the minimal fetch interval. So this is how fast the we will refetch, or like how long we will cache your values for in remote config. And yeah, beware that you probably don't want to specify as low, a very low value for your production environment, because it's going to throttle your app and nothing good going to happen. Just make sure that if you roll out a production builds, make this, by default, it's like 12 hours. We currently have it set to something like, I think this is like 3.6 seconds. So this is a very low value for a production environment. Also, we added this personalized UI function, which actually going to render different buttons, colors for different buttons. And what this does is what Raf actually mentioned at the end of the slides. So you want to do remote config fetch and activate, and this will fetch the new values from our server and actually activate them so we can get them in code with the JavaScript API. Yeah, and what all we do is basically use this remote config get value to get the actual values from our remote config, and then we like render different button styles depending on if we're a Chrome user or if we're a Safari user. Actually, one issue we ran into is that you probably want to explicitly compare this to a string, because since all the time get value will return a string representation, even if it's a Boolean, right? Like you don't want to shorthand check like this. You probably want to explicitly check it against a string. That's all it is to it. It's as simple as this. You basically configure your values and condition once again on the dashboard, and you can access them here. There's a little bit of configuration you need to do, but it's all like very similar to analytics. Like analytics, you can think of it as like production console logs. You can think of this like a production switch statements or if statements, which you don't need to do a redeploy if you want to change something in your app. One last thing that I'm probably going to show is this purchaser tag. We kind of wanted to incentivize people to stay at our app if they already made a purchase. So I think if I refresh this here, just give it a few seconds to load, I should get a toast saying that thanks for being a customer. Here's a promo code for you. If you want to do another purchase, please do so. And this could be an email or anything. We just made a toast for it since we're a purchaser. And this toast will not be shown if you're a first-time user of the app. So it's only going to be shown as stated in the condition when you're like in a purchaser audience. Yeah, that's all the demo that I have for remote config. Should we move on to our Q&A portion?
Yeah, I think so. I wish we could have a lucky winner. Unfortunately, we set that to be only a very small sliver of people, but it would be quite nice if somebody here is part of that lucky winner group. They can maybe post a picture on the Discord or...
Yeah, if you got lucky winner true, please post your screenshots. That'd be nice. All right. So yeah, we actually built some custom question submission thingy. So I'm gonna go in here, and this hopefully should load some questions for Alex to answer. Yeah, let's go one by one and kind of answer these.
You might want to just turn off the dev tools.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the first question is, do you have any advice for those using Firebase for their solution challenge projects? So Alex, for you to kind of be in context, solution challenge is a big competition, Google competition. You probably already know about it. But a lot of people will be using Firebase in their solution challenge projects, and considering that some are only like starting to build their solutions, and the solution deadline is, I think in a month, right? It's like March 31st. So any advice on what features do you want to like focus on during this period, and how to prepare for solution challenge with Firebase?
Yeah. I mean, even though I don't know the details of what a solution challenge would expect you to build and how much to use, technology-wise, probably my main advice would be try to build a real minimal viable product. So don't try to just use more Firebase or more cloud just because it's cool. Focus on things that actually move you forward towards a solution. If the solution is about answering a question, then essentially use the products from Firebase that help you answer that specific question. And if the solution challenge is about just making an improvement, making something better for the user, then look at which product is the best fit, not from your perspective, but from the user's perspective when they open your app. Like what feels more natural for them. So I would say start with the simplest thing in Firebase. Like real-time database is pretty simple to get started. Like you literally just have a JSON document there. So that's really simple to use. Hosting is super simple to use. And just move to things which make sense. Like for instance, you have some data structures in there. So then, yeah, you should use Firestore. Or that's where you have the document and collection. You can do querying. RTDB probably is not great if you need to query some data. But then if you find that you need to query a lot of data with a lot of filters, you might want to even move maybe off Firebase into Google Cloud altogether to use things like Cloud SQL or BigQuery, because these are the tools that allow you to use SQL to do things like analytics and report generation. So my advice would be start with the simplest, most obvious choice and just move from there to where the most appropriate technological product is. It might be Firebase, it might be something else. Do check out Google Cloud as well. It might be a bit confusing because they have tons of products. And they're not particularly well structured like I mean, they're structured in like databases and processing and so on categories, but it's not always really intuitive to understand what those actually mean from a solution perspective. So in that regard, it might be a bit discouraging to use cloud altogether, but do make an effort and see maybe there is a perfect fit for your problem outside of Firebase in Google Cloud. If not, you can probably build it with custom code using most of the Firebase stuff. So yeah, that's my hint there. Try from simple, build on top of it with trying to find the best fit. And if you can't find the best fit, don't worry. Some custom code will probably get you there eventually.
Cool. Thank you for answering that. Yeah, I'm just gonna add that, like in my opinion, Firebase is very easy to start with and just get something hosted, something up there, and then as like solution challenge also states, you want to get feedback from your users, iterate upon that feedback, and roll out new features. And Firebase has, like we've already seen it today, for example, with A/B testing or other features, services, that Firebase allows you to do that really easily. And as Alex pointed out, if you realize that Firebase is not for you, you can move into some Google Cloud solutions and try those and explore those. Okay. Cool. On to the next one. Raf, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. This is an interesting one because I'm in love with the Angular Fire package. I love Angular. I know we spoke about this a little bit, but I love Angular and I love the integration with Firebase. And I've spoken to some React developers. I don't know if maybe that there is some tooling that I'm not aware about, or the question's not aware about, but is there going to be a React Fire package similar to the Angular Fire package?
So as far as I remember, I think there is already a community contributed a Firebase React package, which is pretty good in my opinion. I looked broadly through it, and I think it hits most of the boxes. And I would just advise you just check it out. I think you might be surprised that it actually can do a lot more than you think it could. Yet again, we have really limited resources within DevRel, so a lot of the time we would not be building custom packages for specific third-party frameworks. Nevertheless, if somebody else builds it in the community, we do try to make it easy for them to do this. So if you feel like you get stuck, you try to build one and you get stuck somewhere, or you know someone who's building one and they got stuck somewhere, don't hesitate to reach out, ask questions on Stack Overflow, even or log bugs on the JS SDK, saying, hey, I'm building a package there, and I think your SDK has a problem because it doesn't allow me to do things that should be simple. And we try to look and have the community there. On the flip side, I like React. To be honest, I'm a bigger fan of Vue.js myself, so I'm actually trying to contribute there something along the lines of Firebase and the Vue.js integration. I'll be pushing a mini package, a mini plugin myself there for Firebase and Vue.js next. Even though there's also pretty good community contributed package for the Vue.js version 2. Definitely check out the community packages, I would say. And if you find that they are lacking some features, contribute back, or try to find people to contribute back, advocate for them. That's the best way out there to make sure you have a great coverage.
I think one of the I had no idea that there was the Firebase opensource.com, and I think that would be an incredible resource for many people looking to get involved. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat for anybody that would like to have a look at that.
Yeah, we'll probably include that.
Yeah, go ahead. And there is a lot of activity happening on GitHub as well. We have the official GitHub Firebase repo. We also have the Firebase extended repo, which has a non-official contributors from Googlers and members of the Firebase community, of the Firebase kind of core community. So definitely check both organizations. Firebase's org is the official stuff, and then the extended ones are things which are less official, but still contributed by people who are very knowledgeable around the subject. So, and of course, there's a broad community. You might be, I'm always surprised on how many good quality contributions we get, like outside of the official channels. Like always be on the lookout for cool stuff. And if you find something, then don't hesitate to recommend it to people.
I think this is a very cool thing with Firebase as well. Like every month there is something new. There's some package rolled out, some support for something that's not. If you request a feature, if you're active on the community pages, I think those features will be included in later releases as well.
I think a +1, if you don't mind, Andrei, just something we were speaking about earlier. If you're looking to get some of these out there and you're trying to get the word out, Alex mentioned a great resource would be to post a question on Stack Overflow and then join one of the communities like the discussion boards or the Firebase Slack channel. And if you leave a link to that question in Stack Overflow, there's a good chance that somebody's going to take a look at it and help you out.
Yeah, that's a great.
Also, if you have a great framework that you're developing or a library or even a snippet, and you feel like that really answers a question better than the previous answer, like feel free to also add your answer. Say, hey, by the way, I developed this really cool mini framework or library that should make your question much easier to solve.
I'm really excited about the next one because I think we can all speak to this one. So what is your favorite feature, or what is your favorite, I guess, service to use in Firebase? Out of all of the different things that we've covered all over the workshops and what Alex showed us today, yeah, I'm very curious what Alex is going to say about this.
Okay, probably for me, one of the main things that I'm really is really my favorite is probably Cloud Functions, particularly because of the options it opens. Since pretty much everything can be extended with a function or two. So that's probably stayed as my favorite feature for quite a long time already. And it still is my favorite feature. Other cool things would be probably the ML portions of it. And maybe not as much on the side of really using it, but just kind of looking at what's possible to do and getting inspired and being your own stuff. So things like predictions, things like Firebase ML, as well as some of the other things in the growth pillar. Pretty cool. Pretty cool just to observe how they work and see them being useful for your own app.
Yeah, I'm on with you on this one. I also really like Firebase functions, but on the other hand, I think there's a lot of services that are less popular or less spoken about, but still they bring a lot of power. For example, I haven't even heard about predictions before, but it's a very powerful thing if you have a user base and you want to kind of keep your users engaged or gain some insight of what behaviors they do, right? It's a very, very powerful tool to use. Raf, what about you?
So my favorite is actually going to be probably not as obvious. My favorite is actually hosting, believe it or not. And I think that this is a lot less spoken about because I've actually tried to configure my own servers from scratch, making an Apache server and having to go in and sign into GitHub and download the code and then restart the server, and then there's errors going on, and then just having a place where you can have one line Firebase deploy and all your elastic load balancing needs are met, and you've got immediate caching and different CDNs for your site to be served really quickly. You've got the secure site, they give you the SSL provisioning. All of that is done seamlessly, and so much of it is done behind the scenes. So I'm appreciative for that quite a lot.
That is very true as well.
Yeah, probably for hosting, the SSL provisioning and a bunch of the infrastructure, things like load balancing is still one of the more complicated things. At the same time, if you just need a server without too much of that stuff, Nginx is probably really good for a lot of stuff, or even just native content serving through Node.js. Yet again, as long as you don't have to deal with certificates and load.
So can I ask one more question? Because I always thought it was Nginx, but I guess is it Nginx?
I think the correct pronunciation is Nginx. It just is longer, so
it sounds so much better when you say Nginx.
Is it a sequel?
Yeah, it's shorter. It's shorter. My full name is also not Alex. It's Alexandru, but I like to say Alex, just short.
I think we're going to popularize Nginx.
All right, let's take a couple more. So the series has been primarily focused on e-commerce. Is there any other implementation that you think that Firebase is uniquely suited for? I'm just gonna let you, Alex, answer this because you probably have more insight on this.
Probably if we're talking web, anything that needs kind of real-time interaction, essentially subscribing to changes in the backend service data. Like here, Firebase has a bit of an advantage versus most of the other solutions that you might be using or deploying yourself. It's just more seamless in a lot of ways. For the mobile portion, I think most of the value comes actually from the growth pillar. So anything that you expect to have to deal with audiences, like here is probably or stability, or just pretty much in the middle on the right side of that big slide, is where the Firebase power really shines, because you have all of these solutions seamlessly integrated for most part of it. Also, it's just nice to have the backend that is easy to set up and deploy. But to be honest, like for mobile, if you're already an established publisher, like really the bulk of the value comes from those growth and stability pillars. So I would say anything in that part is really, really good, well suited for Firebase. Anything in the part where you need custom, quick, like pretty much a real-time almost data syncing, which nowadays probably should be true for any web app. To be honest, I think we're in the age in which we would expect any web app to actually react in real time rather than having to hit the refresh button, which we sometimes have to do. So I think as we move into the future, I do expect to see more of these real-time, responsive, seamless, integrated apps. So probably in many of those cases, Firebase just gives you a head start, and later on you can customize it. If you find that you want to have more control yourself over the stack, you can always replace the bits that you feel like you want to own yourself. That shouldn't stop you from just starting quickly ramping up and using Firebase to just put something out there and start gathering user feedback.
That makes sense.
Another good point is that, and I haven't seen this been spoken about a lot, is that Firebase works for game development as well, correct? And that's something that would need real-time updates a lot. If you've got something like a leaderboard or different notifications.
To answer this in full honesty, game development is a tricky subject. Firebase is great for real-time updates for things like a database where you have to push updates to many people at the same time from the same source. With games, it's usually need a much faster update cycle. Like Firebase is pretty good on pushing updates in a sub-second, with sub-second update speeds. With gaming, you probably want millisecond update speed. So instead of 100 milliseconds per update, you might want something like 1 millisecond per update. And here you need specific infrastructure optimized for this kind of like instantaneous pushes. Usually this is done with moving as much as possible to the memory instead of the disk. And this is not ideal for business logic. So it's kind of a different thing. Like with game, you care a bit less about losing that state, but you care a lot about the speed of reaction and the round trip. With more of a classical app, you care a bit less about the round trip time, but you care a lot about not losing data. So gaming is tricky. Gaming with Firebase definitely makes a lot of sense as long as you're targeting things like leaderboards and A/B testing and analytics and even things like Test Lab testing with Test Lab, even things like loss functions or some of the databases that you might use to store player data. But for the actual gaming session, which you have a multiplayer and real-time interacting with each another, you might need a custom solution or a gaming solution that's purposely built as a game server. I would say gaming is tricky. It really depends what kind of game you build. If your game doesn't need this millisecond response time, Firebase is a pretty good fit. But if it does, you will most definitely need something specifically for that.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Thanks for answering all of those questions, and thanks for everybody to submitting those questions. This was pretty cool. We already went a bit over time, so I'm just going to cover last topic for today is although the workshop series is wrapping up and we're finishing rolling out new workshops, we are not stopping to develop the app. We will still push some changes to it, and the idea is to convert our e-commerce website into like a DSC swag distribution platform, or at least that's what we're discussing and talking about. In my opinion, Raf, I hope you agree with this as well. I want to make this a very kind of open source contributing repository where everybody can, by watching our tutorials and our workshops, contribute to the website and roll out new features, make pull requests. That would be very, very awesome if we have this kind of a community-wide going on.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. The whole series, I kind of wanted to be open source by design. I think you can tell just by the README, I made a massive, colorful README, but it really is supposed to be something that allows you to engage with us and with each other and contribute. And even in the smallest sense of learning what it means to contribute on a small project. Alex mentioned that you can contribute on the Firebase, but that's a really big, complicated project. And although I don't want to discourage anyone, I think that having a small place like this is a great opportunity. I've loved contributing with Andriy. It's my first time working together with somebody on a semi-big project, and having more people would make this just exponentially better.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, I'm gonna say this again. If you have any questions or you want to chat with us or just hang out, please go to the Think Outside the Valley Discord server. You can see the link on your screens, or also there's a link in the chat. Yeah, if you have any questions, make an issue on GitHub. We will respond quite. We will try to respond as fast as possible. And also, if you want to improve our app, please make pull requests. We would love to see what you come up with. And yeah, I think that's a wrap.
Thank you very much to Alex for joining us. I think it's the biggest thing.
This was amazing. I think it's a very cool. I was really looking forward to this, and this is a very cool event to end on. I think we ended on a good note.
Yeah, I really think we ended with a serious bang.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks, Alex, for taking the time and showing us all the amazing Firebase stuff. Hopefully see you soon in the future.
Thank you. Same here. Hope to see you soon, hopefully in person.
Yeah, actually.
Hopefully. All right.